What, you know what? Just to be safe thing you did end up saving your later. Learned CPR and first aid. Had to give CPR to a family friend when she collapsed from a heart attack, and thankfully she was brought back after being down for 15 minutes. She only had minor memory problems and mostly just couldn't remember that day. She's still here and kicking years later. Was delivering pizza in a sketchy block of town late at night. Huge apartment complex with multiple buildings. Walking up to the front door, I noticed a couple guys wearing dark clothing about 100 feet behind me walking in my direction. Delivery was on the second floor, and by the time I reached her door I heard the main door of the apartment complex open and close. She used a CC for the order and tipped in cash, so when I was putting the receipt into my bag, where I kept my cash, I actually pulled the rest of the cash out and stuffed it into my inner jacket pocket just to be safe, leaving just the change I had that night in the bag. Started to head down the stairs back out to my car, and two guys jumped out from behind the stairs, and the one had a gun pointed at me and told me to give them the money. I quickly handed them my bag filled with quarters and they took off towards the back entrance of the apartment complex. I never ran so fast in my life back to my car. I wanted to make sure I was as far away as possible before they realized they robbed me of $3.50 in quarters. I dropped my high school girlfriend off, then for some reason I locked the passenger door. Not 10 minutes later I was stopped at a red light and some scummy looking dude tried to open up the door. I have no idea why I locked that door after she got out. I really didn't have a habit of that. No idea what would have happened if that guy got in my truck. Something similar happened to me. I was dropping my friend off at home. He lived in a sketchy neighborhood. I had my driver's side door locked, and as soon as he got out I immediately locked the other one. These three girls come running out of the bushes trying to open my car doors. One jumped on my hood and I effing gunned it. She rolled off my car. The other chucked her drink at my driver's side door. I'm terrified to think about what they were going to do to me. That's a good one to remember. I do this too. Good thing you were able to get away. I have another story similar to yours. My mom had picked me up from my boyfriend's house one night and was taking me back to my car at my apartment. We were taking a long road through a pretty decent neighborhood. It was right in town too. The car in front of us starts slowing down, then stops like kinda across the lane at an angle. Three guys get out and start quickly walking towards our car. Their eyes looked scary. I'm yelling at my mom to lock the doors. Thankfully she locked them prior. And telling her to effing go. She starts backing up quickly and the guys take off back to their car, jump back in, and speed off. I thought about reporting it on the police, but I was so in shock I couldn't even remember the type of car it was and I didn't get the license plate number. I just remember it was a gold color and a 4-door sedan type. They were going to recruit you to their MLM. I was at a sleepover as a kid. I was a little worried because my mom had been oddly tired earlier that day. I went home early because I was worried. By the end of the night I, 14 at the time, had to call an ambulance for my mom, as she was having problems with her heart and I was the only one there with her. She was incapable of forming coherent sentences and would probably not have gotten the help she needed if I wasn't there. So, good thing I was. My dad lost his glasses once. He was going to just use his old prescription but last minute decided to just go to the optometrist anyway in case something changed. Turns out he had a tear in his retina and was booked for surgery within 24 hours. It was bad enough they said he probably would have gone blind really soon had they not caught it when they did. When you're short-sighted it's because your eyeball is not the right shape. It's not a ball, it's an egg shape, and the more short-sighted you are the more out of shape it is. This stretches the retina and it can just tear by itself. It's something like people generally have a lifetime risk of 1 in 100,000 of it happening, but past a certain prescription it's 1 in 1,000. It can happen to anyone because the human body isn't perfect, so everyone should look out for a sudden increase in floaters, flashing lights, or it seeming like there's a sudden curtain pulled over your vision. These are signs of retinal detachment and you need to go to the emergency room immediately as there's only a small window, I've been told 24 hours, in which they can try to fix it, otherwise you'll lose vision in that eye. This are brought to you by my ridiculously vision and every optician I've interacted with in my adult life. Not my but I was getting ready for school whilst mum was vomiting in the bathroom. She said it was just a stomach bug and to just go to school but mentioned her arm hurt. Something didn't sit right, so I called the ambulance from downstairs. They arrived and took her into the ambulance. She then proceeded to have 3 cardiac arrests and needed defibrillated each time. A double bypass later and she was up and about within a month. Paramedics told me she would have died 5 minutes after I left, if I hadn't called. Snow chains at the bottom of the mountain. A bunch of cars passed me on a clear road on the way up with several warnings all the way up. I saw a local throwing on chains with no snow in the area. I decided to be safe and put them on. 30 minutes later I was in one of the worst snow driving conditions I've ever seen. Whiteout conditions in a snowstorm that eventually resulted in the complete shutdown of the roads. I passed car crash after car crash with just enough traction to feel somewhat comfortable moving 15 miles an hour. Anyone heading to Tahoe needs chains and chains that fit. Don't F around. I don't care if you have a 4-wheel drive. Driving through Tahoe and Mammoth during snowstorms is no joke. Literally sunny with no clouds to blinding white darkness in an hour. Edit. One more thing. If you find yourself near Heavenly and Siri sends you to a snowed over hill that feels too steep, turn around. Unless you have the right setup you aren't gonna make it. Snow chains or not, you will slide. Just take the Harrah's gondola if it's that bad. If you don't already have your own gear, try another resort. Heavenly is uniquely bad for rentals and beginners in general. This advice is also good for swimming at a beach, particularly on islands. If locals aren't swimming at it, you didn't just discover a secluded beach. It's likely life-threateningly dangerous. The ocean is relentless and doesn't care if you've just made a mistake. Riptide, or undercurrent, or dangerous fishing traps, or maybe just as the tide comes back in, while it's still shallow, the increasing wave size can bash you against sunken crap on the beach floor. Lot of ancient mini harbors and sunken poles for you to get impaled on. I used to think just the ocean was murderous, but the more science I studied the more I realized, all fluid dynamics is a murderous embodiment of chaos that wants to punish life for fighting against entropy. This sparked a memory from when I was an HS 25 years ago. My boyfriend, his best friend and my best friend, ladies in the back, were driving in his Bronco, I think, up to Tahoe to ski. It was a 3-hour drive and we had been partying the night before, so I was taking a little nap. I woke up with a panicked feeling and noticed Nick, my boyfriend, wasn't wearing his seatbelt. I just started yelling, "Nick, put your seatbelt on. Nick, please." I started crying. He's like, "Chill, why are you being crazy?" His friend was like, "Just do it to make her stop." So he did. 30 minutes later we were singing along to the radio and hit black ice. The Bronco rolled about 3 times and landed upside down and spun. If it wasn't for a giant tree that caught the bumper, we would have slid off the mountain. Nick busted his shoulder. Most of the damage was on the front passenger's side. We all had whiplash and scratches from stuff flying around the car, but otherwise walked away. There is no way Nick would have survived if he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. You would think he would have been grateful for that, but a month later I found out he and my BFF were sleeping together because I wasn't ready yet. I got really sick with what I thought was a virus or infection or something. Turns out it might have been something like that, but whatever it was made significantly worse by the fact that I had leukemia. One day I was attempting to make karaoke for the first time, a kind of Filipino fried mochi, and after I popped them in the oil, I settled in and watched them carefully. I never wear an apron whilst cooking, but for some reason I figured why not this time, and as soon as I stepped out of range of the fryer, they all exploded. Turns out, karaoke can form an impermeable shell when fried, so pressure built up inside until they popped and sprayed hot oil all over the kitchen. Of course, I was safely away reaching for an apron and was completely dumbfounded. Made sure to punch some holes in all subsequent batches. Of course, once I cleaned the kitchen, I ate them and they were delicious. 10/10 highly recommend. Normally I'm pretty impressionable and cave to peer pressure, but this one time when I was younger I was hanging with my friends and a couple of older high school guys I'd only met that day. The girls were all fawning over them, but I could tell they were idiots. When they all wanted to go for a drive with the guys, I thought, nah, I don't trust these guys and I think it's best I just call my parents and go home. I got a call the next morning from one of the girls who was passenger. One of the high school boys was driving. They'd had a serious crash and one of the girls wasn't wearing her seatbelt and hit her head on the dash and was in a coma for 6 months. She was in intensive care and rehabilitation for years. Still can't believe of all the days I decided not to go with the flow, it probably saved my life. Terribly sad about my friend. We were really close but she never came right and her personality changed. I still wonder how successful she might have been and if we'd still be friends if that hadn't happened to her. Really sad. Was watching my toddler nephew and he'd found a metal straw somewhere in the house and started playing with it. He was just tapping stuff and waving it around, but I'd just read a story on Reddit about a woman who got completely fed up by a metal straw when she fell and it impaled her face, so I took the metal one from nephew and gave him a soft, squishy silicone one to play with instead. I'm not exaggerating when I say less than 5 minutes later, he fell like toddlers do and I saw the silicone straw all smushed into his cheek. I had to just sit for a while after that, lol. On a road trip with my siblings and Dad in Latin America, he lived there and we were visiting. On a highway at night, with clouds, no moon and no lights. This was a new highway that nobody likes taking now, as criminals often leave glass or spikes to puncture tires and rob you, or worse. We were driving and this guy was pulled over and waving for help. My dad stopped behind and the guy was scared and asked if we could light up his car while he changed a flat tire. He was terrified of being out there alone and rightfully so. Dad goes to get out to help and my sister grabbed him and said she didn't think this felt right. Dad assured us it was fine and almost got out, but sister grabbed him again. Right then a car flew by the door right where he would have been. 4 guys jump out, one grabs the man, puts a gun to his head and the others sprint to our car. There was a brief chase down the highway, but luckily their old Corolla didn't keep up with our Jeep, and they gave up after 2-3 minutes of driving 170 km/h. My sister saved my dad's life, and probably ours, by making him stay in the car that extra few seconds. Edit. The guy with a gun to his head lived and was okay given everything. After the chase, we had to turn around and continue on the way we were originally going, as there were no other routes to get back home, unless we backtracked 6 hours. After we passed the vehicle of the man, we saw he wasn't there anymore and we thought the worst. Luckily we ended up passing 4 National Guard vehicles about 2 kilometers later and saw that the man was with them talking to them. To answer, I've never known if the guy was in on it. The timing has always seemed off to me, however the look of fear in his face was so genuine when the guys jumped out that I can remember it perfectly 15 years later. Edit 2. The country in question is Venezuela. Might sound ridiculous, but many years ago when I did my mandatory community service, was a thing in Germany as a counterpart to mandatory military service. There was a particular day in a pretty harsh winter. I usually went to work with my bike, as the streets were cleared of snow and ice anyway. At this day, I didn't take my helmet off because when I arrived at the place I worked I immediately started to shovel snow and didn't even walk inside first. My workplace was a huge and old 4-story hostel in the woods. The roof was packed with snow and there were massive icicles hanging from the gutters. When a co-worker asked me why I decided to look like an idiot with my helmet on, I jokingly replied it was for serious security reasons. A few moments later an icicle block fell down and hit me on the head and the shoulders. The impact was so brutal that it made me fall down on my knees. Shoulders were bruised but my head was fine. I really don't know what could have happened if I didn't wear my stupid bicycle helmet for fun that morning. Serious injury for sure. I had a female patient coming for I-131 therapy. Patient must be not pregnant and to make sure we do a blood test one day prior to dosing. I checked the results on screen, that was negative. I printed it out and put it in the patient file just in case, although we went paperless years earlier. After giving her radiation safety instructions and discharging her, she came a couple of days saying that she was late. The doctor inserted another pregnancy blood test and came out positive. The lab technician went to the previous negative blood test and changed it to positive. Haven't I printed the test, it would look like I dosed the patient while pregnant and could get fired. Staff before this incident used to make fun of me being paranoid. After this incident everyone started printing the results. Because a lot of people asked and to answer their questions I reported it to the head of department. He immediately involved the medical physics department and they calculated the dose to the fetus and found out she had to abort because the baby will be severely mutated. So they involved the OB-GYN also. Last thing I knew that a huge investigation was carried out and the patient filed an official complaint. I don't know what happened later. Everything completely changed. Policies and procedures, hospital's information system, quality department was established, risk management department was established, etc. That was back in the beginning of 2007. The system was installed in the end of 2006. That was the first time anyone used an electronic system. ETA 2. I wrote the reply and went to sleep and woke up never thinking that this would blow up. Wow. Thank you everyone for upvoting and thank you kind stranger for the award. Thanks for everyone who wished me a happy cake day. You all made my day. Edit 3. That story happened in MENA, Middle East and North Africa. I once subcultured a master culture which was used in a very important research study. We were specifically told not to do that because of patent liabilities. But still I had a gut feeling that we were going to need another plate cultured. And lo and behold, a student accidentally dropped the plate in a lab and it shattered. Saved us a 6 months of time and penalties. I have no idea what cultures and subcultures are in this context, but I know what 6 months of work are, so good for you. Driving along highway and get a bad feeling with drivers ahead of me tailgating back to back at 70 miles per hour. I switch lanes to be safe and get further clearance. Not 2 seconds later one of the cars ahead slams on their brakes, looked like no effing reason, and the cars in my previous lane slam into each other, and one car that was behind me slams into all of them full blast. Cars go flying into the air Hollywood style, flipping up nearly vertical before slamming back down. I'd probably be dead or have a lifelong disability if I hadn't moved. Avoid dumb drivers kids, keep safe distances and buffers whenever possible. Worked alone in a gambling video poker place. Closing. Strange guy came in and started making small talk with me. I was expected to be kind and friendly to everybody who came in, so I was doing that. I decided to send a message to my boyfriend and a friend, and then something in me told me to take a picture of the guy as he moved closer to the counter I was behind. I snuck one real quick and sent it to said friend since she was awake. She called me immediately as she drove the 20 minutes to my job. An hour before I got off. I'll add, I didn't drive, so I had no vehicle in the now abandoned parking lot, the only car being his, which was conveniently backed in, right next to front door. 2 days later there was a missing persons report released to someone who was a very familiar build and features that I have and suspected trafficking in the area. She went missing later that same night. He left after my friend showed up. I've never had such an uneasy feeling in my life, and I truly think sending those messages are what saved my life. He was waiting for me to get off work at 1 AM. Our hours were right on the front door. I had something similar happen as a teen. It was my 13th birthday and my parents had rented a hotel room for my friends and I to enjoy. As young girls tend to do, we were running around the hotel being silly. At one point we're racing each other. Running up and down the stairs into the elevators and such, when we run past a guy standing outside his hotel room. He instantly gave me really bad vibes, based on how he was looking at us. This wasn't just some annoyed adult who wanted this group of girls to sfoo and quit running amok. He watched us like prey. So half of us run to the other end of the hall for the stairs while 2 of us get into the elevator to see who can get down to the first floor from the 3rd floor, fastest. As we're going down, the elevator stops at the 2nd floor and I think, dang it, we're gonna lose this round. But when it opens, the creep from the 3rd floor is standing there. Before he can even get into the elevator, I grab my friend's hand and drag her off the elevator with me. He says, "Where are you going?" "I thought you were going down," and I said, "No, this is where we need to go," and I start sprinting to the stairs where my other friends are. He never got off the elevator at the 1st floor and we went straight to our room after that and didn't leave for the rest of the night. My friend kept saying I was being paranoid and that there were 2 of us versus 1 of him. As if 2 small girls can take on a grown man. I didn't tell my parents what happened that night, but I did see that man's face a couple weeks later. He was arrested and charged in a string of rapes in the area. I cried my eyes out and told my mom everything. She was so relieved that I trusted my gut. But it did not help with her helicopter mom tendencies. Saved the GPS location of my vehicle on Google Maps before exploring a national forest with a road trip buddy. We grabbed some fishing poles and head out towards the nearest water location on our map to hopefully catch a couple fish. Turns out it was a swamp, not a lake, and we got so incredibly turned around it could have ended very badly. We really didn't go that far in from where we parked, but somehow ended up on the other side of the swamp without realizing it. Drizzling rain, mosquitoes, bear tracks, and the sun started going down before we found the car. Without the GPS coordinates saved, it would have been a cold, wet night in the woods at a minimum, and more than likely a search and rescue required situation. Not mine, but my mom's. She and I were home alone and I was getting ready to go to her party. I came upstairs and found her with the carbon monoxide detector in pieces on the coffee table. She said it was beeping, and apparently once years ago in our last house one was malfunctioning and giving a false alarm, so I guess she just assumed it was happening again. I shrugged it off and continued getting ready. I was about to leave, but something was nagging at me. She was insisting it was fine. After some arguing with her, I said no. We are calling the fire department. So I did. They came, and the levels of carbon monoxide were so high in the basement they said anyone sleeping down there would be dead already. Our cats were vomiting from the poisoning and we didn't realize. I guess the filter on the furnace was so clogged it was pumping out carbon monoxide. One of the firefighters pulled me aside and said if I hadn't called I likely would have come home to my mom dead in her bed. Had my boat trailer bearings repacked by the boat repair shop dealer before I went on a trip that I had to tow it for 400+ miles. I usually repacked the bearings myself but figured I'd have the pros do it since I had a long haul ahead of me. The day before I left I decided to double check that the bearing case was full of grease. Without it they would overheat and I'd be FK'd royally and stranded with a high risk of a wheel actually coming off the trailer if I didn't notice it in transit. There was no grease at all in the bearing case on any of the 4 wheels. I would have been lucky to make it 20 miles before something serious happened. Also, this has been a habit for decades. Pat my pocket to make sure my keys are in my pocket before closing the locked house door, my car door, etc. I lock my doors habitually. Walk through a door, reach behind me, twist the lock. It's the way I was raised, and I honestly don't even think about it. I've actually gotten myself into trouble absent-mindedly locking other people's doors, house, offices, shops. I'm a menace. This one night, I'm sitting and reading pretty late, and I suddenly think, I need to check my front door to make sure it's locked. Lo and behold, it's actually unlocked. Shocked me a bit, but I locked the door and the deadbolt and slid the chain for good measure, then go get myself a glass of water. As I'm walking with my glass of water from the kitchen back past my front door, I catch a movement out of the corner of my eye. I turn to the door and watch the doorknob slowly try to turn left and right. The murky movements that a locked doorknob can be forced when twisted. I put on as deep of a voice as I can and forcefully stage project, I have a gun, and I'm calling the cops. The doorknob stopped turning. I slept in a closet that night. Just in case. Hey, thanks for making it all the way to the end, you absolute Chad. You're a legend. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to like and subscribe for more of Reddit's top content. I'll see you in the next video, you beautiful people.